Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Kathryn Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Welcome to Spirit's Journey. We're coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. For full listening and more about us, you can go to spiritsjourneyradio.com. We're here in the Heartland, holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Welcome, everyone. So we've got an amazing show for you guys today. And we're also being joined today by our executive producer, Mark Jabin, who's been helping us out over the years to find amazing guests. So welcome to Mark. And we have today, again, Ginny Whitelaw. We had her in the past a few years ago, and we're so impressed. We said we got to have another conversation. So if you missed that, let me tell you a little about Ginny. She's a Zen master in the Shuisen Zen lineage of Rinzai Zen and founder of the Institute for Zen Leadership. She combines a rich scientific background with senior leadership experience at NASA and more than 25 years developing leaders in global companies, healthcare, education, and nonprofits. She's authored 4 books, including the award-winning Resonate, published in 2020, The Zen Leader, published in 2012. She also co-developed the Phoebe, which is a unique personality test linking mind, body, and behaviors. In her nearly 10 years at NASA, Dr. Whitelaw became the deputy manager for integrating the International Space Station. She holds a degree in physics, philosophy, a PhD in biophysics, and a 5th degree black belt in Aikido. And you can also find her articles in Forbes.com, where she regularly contributes in Zen leadership and the science of resonance. So welcome, Ginny.
Thank you, Kathryn. Thank you, Patrick. Good to be back with you.
Yes, good to have you back.
Well, great to have you. So let's talk about Resonate 18 months later, and how has that changed you and your teaching?
I think that in writing Resonate, I became much more attuned to how we are always tapping into a field and feeding a field. We think of ourselves as very material beings, but I became much more intrigued by, I'll call it, our energetic interactions with the world around us. And the feeling of how, when we attune to what is happening, we can tune ourselves to appropriate actions, to resonating with those relationships, with fitting into those situations and being able to add our value. And I think I've been much more aware of how important it is to listen, to pay attention, that it's in that listening that we're sort of tuning our antenna, much as people have an antenna tuned to your program tonight. In order to pick something up, we have to tune to it. And that is as true in the world as it is in radio and internet broadcasting.
Wow. And so what if, you want to tune something out? So you're kind of talking about tapping into the field. What if you tap in and there's, I don't like these energies? How do we get out of those?
Well, isn't there a lot of that going on today too? I mean, look at the suffering of this world. And one of the temptations can be, I want to put up some shutters to it, or I want to tune it out. But when we tune out, I mean, if you just think of it in your own body, in your own experience right now, whether you're listening to this program or whatever, of tuning something out creates a tension in our body. It's like we're putting up shutters, and there's a kind of turning away or evasiveness that happens. There's another way to be with what's going on, that is also to let it run through. The way you might think of a rain gutter conducts water from the eaves to the earth by just letting it run through. If we can be clear, not stuck, not triggered, not getting all wrapped up and stuck on things ourselves, then we can be in a mess without getting messed up. And that allows us, right, that allows us to feel into what part of all this suffering we can heal, we can do some good in, right? And how powerful is that, right?
Totally.
So can you give us a little bit more of a description of what is it that people want to tune into? Because when you're tuning to something, you're tuning into something. Can you describe what that is that people are really reaching for?
The first phrase that comes to mind, Patrick, and it's an excellent question, is how about the present moment? Let's tune into what's here right now.
Yeah, that's a good start.
Right. If you and I are in conversation, I'm tuning to you. I'm tuning to Kathryn and Mark. I'm tuning to where are you going? How do we get on the same wavelength? I'm tuning to what do people need to hear right now? What is it where do we need to go right now? So there's a sense of being present where when it sounds so simple. It sounds so obvious to say be in the present moment. But what that means is our senses are alive. They're active. And so they're picking up whatever is in the zeitgeist or whatever is in the field or whatever is in the conversation. And sometimes we might pick up on something that's not said rather than what's said, or we might pick up on an idea that seemed to come out of nowhere, but it didn't really come out of nowhere. There's always a precursor cause to something, right? It's more like something got us, something stimulated us. So we don't have to know exactly what we're tuning into so much as to be here now. And then what's present now will stimulate us.
So taking that one step further, because one of the things that you talked to us before when you were talking about resonate and that you talk about with this next book is energy patterns. So as people are really focusing on that present moment and they're picking up on these more subtle energy patterns, what is it that people can really expect to experience?
Yeah. Well, these energy patterns are 4 ways that energy gets organized in our human body, 4 ways the nervous system kind of puts it together. And these have been intuited for centuries. They're, even when you think about ancient, Taoist cultures, they'll talk about the yin and the yang, or the different elements of earth and water and air and fire. And in indigenous cultures, in very old wisdom traditions, there's this sense that energy has these different qualities, or even matter has these different qualities. But of course, we now know matter is like just a very condensed form of energy. So as it plays through you and me, it takes some form. And when we have names for those forms, when we know how to access those forms, then we're able to match situations with the right kind of energy. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So these 4 energies, which in our own work, which has been a research interest of mine for 15, 20 years now, in developing the Phoebe that Kathryn mentioned in the introduction. Phoebe is a personality test, you might say, but unlike all other personality tests, it doesn't stop at the neck. It really integrates mind and body. And in integrating mind body, it's measuring these 4 patterns of energy that run through us in all ways. They affect us physically, so they show up in our movement. They affect us emotionally, so they each have a different kind of emotional signature. They affect the thoughts that we think, and they affect how we do things. So all the way through, these energies are running. And when we can get access to them physically, we get to work with ourselves in a very practical way to shift what energy we're going to manifest in the world. So what do they feel like? Let me give you some just simple movements so you can get a feel for them. If you were to start with the most open and expansive of the patterns, that would be what we call visionary. And you can get a feel of this by and I encourage if you're listening at home, you can play along with this. But if you just place your hands at the side of your head as if your thumbs were sticking in your ears, and then just pull them away and use your peripheral vision to sense the entire dome around you. Now, don't do this if you're driving, but if you're in a place where you can expand to the sort of soft focus. You get that visionary bigness. And in just going to our peripheral vision, we've really stimulated the lateral temporal lobes. We're getting a lot of more blood flow to the sides of the brain. We're also getting a much bigger view. So nothing sharply focused, but much more extensive or expansive. And we can add to that by just sort of feeling into the underside of the arm, the extensor side of the arm, and just sort of wander your finger around or wander your hand around in a kind of expansive, drifting way in a completely random pattern, no repeating motion. And you get some of the feeling of this drifting, hanging, expansive motion. It has a way of using the nervous system in a very expansive way. And it's very open. The senses are very open. So just feel into that bigness. It's associated with inspiration and imagination, sensing, in a sense, what wants to happen here. And now, as that energy starts to come through us, because to resonate is to vibrate with. So as we start to pick something up, it means something in us is literally starting to vibrate with it. It's starting to pick it up and do something with it. As this energy comes through us, now, if you just take your hands and make, say, the fronts and sides of a box, here the energy comes through us, it starts taking on form. We call this form pattern the organizer. So just use your hands to make the fronts and sides of a box, or you can make 3 steps in a project plan, or you might hold up 3 fingers and count 1, 2, 3. You know people who speak like this in a very organized, disciplined way. Physically in the body, what we're doing is giving energy form, but temperamentally, how this shows up is to attend to details, to break big projects down into steps, to be able to get a project plan or any kind of plan, to have an agenda for a meeting, to be able to have something take on form. So now we're starting to take this big idea, we give it form through the organizer. If we descend deeper into the body, we get down into the lower body, the area we call hara. You probably remember me talking about this the first time, the lower abdomen. And if you want to get a feel for where that hara is a Japanese word, but it's the center of power for the martial arts. But it's also, a womb of consciousness, if you will, a source of new life, right? But if you just rock back and forth in your seat, or you were to pivot your hips or turn your hips, you can feel a point down in your lower belly that you're kind of moving around. And that's the collaborator center. And if you just sort of rock back and forth, this energy is one that naturally engages people. It's very playful and rhythmic, and it can pick up rhythm with other people. So it's very useful to start to get people moving with you. And then finally, if you were to descend all the way down to the base, and for this, if you press your feet into the floor and just press your hands together and point them down into the earth, this final energy we call the driver. And this is about pushing it across the finish line or meeting that deadline or hitting that target. It's very determined. As you can even hear in my voice, it takes on an edge. So it can be very challenging and edgy, but it's very good for getting it done. It has that boom, determination to not give up. So if you just kind of feel into that in your own body, we go from expansive to form to rhythm to pushing drive. And you have access to all 4. But you probably, if you played along, notice that some of them maybe feel a little more available to you than others. And that's what the Phoebe measures. So you can get a sense of your personality in terms of its mix of these primary colors, these primary patterns that operate in you. And then when you look at a real live relationship, a real live situation, you could start to read it for what's really called for here. Is this a time to expand and listen and just take it in? Let go of my own preconceived notions and just listen? Is this a time to start giving some things some detail and some form and tidy up some loose ends? Is this a time to engage and play with an idea, or engage with this person and just help them relax and roll with the punches? Or is this a time to be very determined and very challenging and push it across the finish line. So let me pause. I made that a little long-winded, but it's important to feel these things because these patterns are actual experiences and we have access to all of them as well as preferences.
Well, Jenny, I have a question for you. There's another assessment called StrengthsFinder, which is used by the Gallup organization, as I understand it. And they're really focusing on playing to your strengths. But I know in the Zen Leader, you talked about shifting from playing to your strengths to strengthening your play. What would you say about that?
Yeah. It's a great point because when it comes to like picking a career, or your major in college or whatever, you want to play to your strengths. You want to pick the areas that and what we mean by strengths in the pattern sense is your home patterns. These are going to be the things that come so easy and naturally to you. And if all you do is live out of your strengths, there will be some things we never do well. And there'll be certain times where we're kind of digging a hole for ourselves. So this is the challenge with only playing to strengths, because there's times when we need our weaker patterns and we don't need them as much as our strengths. So I'm not saying, each pattern gets 25% of our life, but there will be certain situations. So for example, my home pattern is organizer. And if I took the Strengths Finder, it would put certain things at the top of its, 34 traits that would confirm that I can attend to details, that I can be very disciplined and, execute and get stuff done and all that kind of stuff. And there are times when that collaborator energy, that ability to just roll with the punches and engage people becomes so important for me, or else I end up doing everything alone. I take on too much myself. So I've come to realize the weakness of my strength and know when I quit digging the hole deeper, when I need to get help, when I need to bring in other people. So I don't see it as either or anymore. It's not, do I play to my strengths or, strengthen my play? It's both and. We strengthen our play overall by using our strengths and bringing in our weaker patterns in those moments where they are exactly what's needed for the situation.
Well, I know in Chinese medicine, they talk about how through the course of a day, the internal organ that the energy in the body is emphasized in shifts over time. So could it be also that during the course of a day, we naturally shift from one energy pattern to another?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know of any research that has a good answer to that question. So it's something that maybe is a question to be explored. What I do experience is that, and what we do know is that when one part of the body goes into a pattern, the rest of the body mind tends to follow, which is why the body can be such an important tool for training the mind. Because if I know I need access to a certain energy, I can move there physically and get the benefit of the thought processes and behaviors and emotions that go with it. Now, whether that happens naturally due to certain biological cycles, I don't know. That's not been a really vibrant experience of mine. I mean, I'm not aware of a time of day when I suddenly become more collaborator-ish or visionary-ish. For me, it becomes more situational. But could there be something at play there? Sure.
Now, Phoebe is the assessment. Can you remind us what Phoebe stands for? And also, do you have any kind of workshops or trainings that go along with that?
Sure. That Phoebe, it stands for Focus Energy Balance Indicator, because it's really looking at the balance of these four patterns within our personality. What we do is train people in how to experience it first in themselves in a class we call Phoebe for You, how they can experience it in themselves and figure out how to use it. And then we also offer certification where coaches or trainers or facilitators can learn how to use it in their work. And Mark, I know you experienced something around Phoebe for You. I'm wondering if you had some experience about what happened in that for you, what you picked up in that. Anything you'd add?
Well, curiously, my internet connection was unstable, and so I had to communicate through the chat. But what I thought you did very well was you fielded comments from the chat and you turn them into talking points to elaborate upon. And you did that repeatedly and with skill. And I thought that it made me feel listened to and appreciated. And it was also just nice to hear your elaborations upon the kind of key concepts.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, we in that course, what we really do is help people explore these patterns in themselves, even in the chat, right? And then what each pattern is good for, where they could use them, how they can start to read these patterns in others. Because again, the more when we get a new framework, one of the real beauties of it is that we could start to see things, discern things more clearly. Like, oh, there's driver energy there. I better know that's where that person is. I don't want to waste their time, because not that we want to waste anyone's time, but I better get right to the point with this kind of a person. You know, we start to get this sense of how to work with each energy in the way that our relationships get stronger. So thank you for that, Mark.
So how can somebody find you if they're interested in taking the assessment or also doing training with you?
Well, what a generous question. Zenleader.global is our website, and they'll see in our offerings, there's a whole page on Phoebe offerings with all these courses we've talked about. You can also just go to phoebeassessment.com and you'll end up in the same place. But Zenleader.global will get people to all of the things that we're offering around not only just Phoebe, but the Resonate class and the Zen Leader program. So if somebody feels like, whoa, you know, I want to take this further, that's zenleader.global is a great place to go. And thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome. And so one of the things you've talked about is using this to become more connected. And that's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with the resonating. And so, you know, what kinds of things, what kind of benefits can people receive by being more connected? What kind of impact can it have in their families and communities?
Well, you know, I'll start with Mark's point just a moment ago. When somebody feels heard, a relationship gets stronger. It's such a simple and obvious thing, right? But part of what we can do when we're connected in a relationship is it's much easier to build trust and reciprocity in that relationship, because the people we're with are feeling heard. We're tuned into each other. From the neuroscience, we know that when we're in a really connected conversation, we're making maps in our own, you know, cortex of the other person. And that when we're following along with what each other's saying, we're actually almost anticipating the next part, you know, the next question or the next part of the conversation. When people are really in sync, you could put them into a couple of, you know, MRI machines, and the in syncness shows up in the way their brain waves work together. So connected conversations are not just theoretical. There's actually a co-resonance that starts to happen when we get on the same wavelength with people, so those relationships get stronger. And not only that, but people don't feel alone. We don't feel alone. The more connected we feel, the more we feel supported by the larger forces or nature or our families or our loved ones. You know, the more connected we feel, the less we fall into the fears associated with the vulnerability of being this little separate meat suit, you know, trying to make it in the world all by herself or all by himself. It's a different, the connectedness is exactly what takes away fear. And
well, it's interesting that you would bring that up, because I think with COVID, people have been isolated for a long time, and we're just starting to come out of that now. But I'm wondering, like, following your offerings online and seeing all the courses that you're offering and workshops, I'm wondering, you know, that really does help people connect to something with greater meaning and purpose. And I'm wondering, you know, what you're seeing as people come out of their isolation and seek knowledge, seek instruction, seek a broader way of looking at things. What kind of patterns are you seeing emerging?
Yeah, I think it's not just what we're seeing. I mean, we're seeing the data around this too, that from this isolation you speak of, there are a lot of people who have really suffered in their self-described mental wellness. They have felt more isolated, they've felt more alone. And
Jenny, I'm going to need to pause there for just a moment because we're getting ready to go into our station break. And so we're going to be listening to a show sponsor as well as station sponsors. And you are listening to Spirit's Journey Radio, simulcast on Truth Frequency Radio and Oneness Talk Radio. And we will see you on the other side. Have you ever heard the expression, you are what you eat? Many of us have, but what about what we drink? We don't really talk about that, even though our bodies are about 60% water. You've probably noticed a difference in how you feel after eating fast food or having that sugary snack. There's probably also a difference in how you feel after eating a really healthy meal or drinking a healthy beverage. You'll notice the same thing when you drink fresh, healthy, crystalline water instead of regular tap water that contains chlorine and sometimes even fluoride. All water is not created equal. Living Miracle LLC provides a medical-grade water technology that produces unlimited antioxidant-rich crystallized water. This technology is an incredible investment in your continued health and will last over 40 years with no moving parts and only minimal maintenance. Japan has been using the same system in their hospitals for over 47 years. Professional athletes also enjoy the tremendous benefits for peak performance with the extra energy that they receive using the crystallized water. To get your own Living Miracle machine and begin experiencing the tremendous health benefits of crystallized water, contact Nicholas at 913-359-8583. You can also email Nicholas at livingmiraclellc@gmail.com. Again, that's livingmiraclellc@gmail.com.
Welcome to the Self-Ascension Classroom, affordable and beautiful home study for your mystical journey. Imagine the gift of studying everything that you've ever wanted at home and on your time. Yes, it is possible, and there is so much to choose from as you dive into your home study experience. Remember that with every moment you spend studying this gift, you ignite your divinity. Imagine the mysteries of the Tohil and the crystalline clarity and radiant abundance of Vesa, a mastery balancing technique and certification process, and then cosmic life regression. Travel the universe and remember. Allow yourself the gift of navigating the inner matrix. This beautiful ascended mastery program of the violet flame will take you to places you may not have dared to dream to go, and then you will rediscover the true gift of your divine nature. Yes, the time is now to study the ancient mysteries, and it's so easy to begin. Discover the Self-Ascension Classroom only at ShriandKira.com. That's ShriandKira.com. Namaste.
Would you like to have more energy and better health with the push of a button? With the Living Miracle medical grade water system, that's exactly what you'll get. Considering that our bodies are about 60% water, it's an investment in your health that will pay off in the long run. Professional athletes enjoy the benefits of this water system, which they find gives them more energy. It also assists in the absorption of nutrients, increases physical recovery and performance in workouts, and helps the body detox. The origins of this machine trace back to Japan after the Second World War. They studied cultures while people were living long, healthy lives and discovered the secret was drinking water rich with antioxidants. They created a machine that takes normal tap water, filters it, and then changes its molecular structure into a more crystalline form. They've been using this crystalline water in hospitals for over 47 years, and the longevity of their people is testimony to this healing water. To get your own Living Miracle machine and begin experiencing the tremendous health benefits of crystallized water, contact Nicholas at 913-359-8583. You can also email Nicholas at livingmiraclellc@gmail.com. Again, that's livingmiraclellc@gmail.com. And we are back from the break. If you're just joining us, this is Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Kathryn Andries, coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio and Oneness Talk Radio.
And today we are joined by Ginny Whitelaw, who is a Zen master and founder of the Institute for Zen Leadership. She has a varied background. She is currently a contributor to Forbes.com, holds a degree in physics, philosophy, and a PhD in biophysics. She spent 10 years at NASA and is sharing all her wisdom with us today, especially about connecting the head and heart and Phoebe, which is a way to understand our energy patterns. So, Jenny, before the break, we were talking about the mind-body connection, and that it's really crucial to have that connection in order to be able to flow between, for example, the 4 different energy patterns you mentioned. So my question is, why are so many of us disconnected between our mind and body? And how can we heal that?
Yeah, we live in our heads. It's a natural stage of human development that comes on even as we're kids, where we start dissociating from our bodily feelings. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I mean, as I say, it's a natural stage of human development, but psychologists can actually tell when a little kid will draw a self picture, depending on how long they make the neck, it's how far are they trying to get away from their emotions. So, and with so many kids, we've been told, I'll give you something to cry about, or, stuff your feelings. Don't act like that. Don't act like this, so there starts to be some dissociation. And we also, growing up, we're going to sit still in school desks for many years while our head is learning all kinds of stuff. So there's a kind of disconnect in the development of mind and brain, of body and brain, that goes on, where we can stuff a lot of things into the body, but the brain is not so aware of them. So reconnecting that becomes a pathway to reconnecting, to feeling our connected self altogether. The connection, or resolving the seeming separation of body-mind, becomes really a gateway to resolving all false illusions of separation, including between self and other, even life and death. These are the kind of dualities that Zen training deals with. And the gateway to all of them is how to reconnect body and mind.
Well, Jenny, you talk a lot about Zen principles in your books, and I know you also are very accomplished at Aikido. In terms of relationship and relating to others, what are the key Zen principles that you like to focus on, and how do those relate to the Aikido principles that you practice in your very physical way?
Well, in the front of every Aikido dojo, at least all the ones that I had trained in and taught in, there were always what they called 4 basic principles of Aikido. And the first one is relax completely. Well, that's impossible. People think they're relaxed, but we're holding all kinds of tension in our body, especially, again, when we feel isolated and vulnerable and we're shutting things out. We were talking earlier about just how disconnected this time can be, even with COVID. So that you get tension in the body. Likewise, in Zen, we say, don't let the mind get stuck, don't let the mind get stuck on things. So how to stay free flowing in the present moment. To say it's a principle, again, might put us up in our head to think of it as a principle of Zen, but it becomes a physical experience through Zen training of how to stay present. Aikido also would say, move from your lower body. They call it the 1 point. And keep weight underside. So this lower abdomen, this area we call hara, is deeply emphasized in Aikido. And likewise in Zen, it's a real center of power and development in Zen, where we breathe down into the hara with every breath. And again, to call it a principle sounds like a head thing, but this is a deeply physical principle that allows our breath to drop to a deep, low frequency so it can hold or contain or resonate with the heart and the head. So we can get a sort of a coherent resonance of our entire mind-body instrument. That is a deep Zen practice in every breath of meditation. That's what we're doing, at least in the tradition of Zen that I teach and train in. And the principle of Aikido was to extend energy. They say extend ki, send your energy out, not in. And this is also a key principle of Zen and Zen leadership, of rather than reacting to the world with resistance, what we earlier talked about, like putting up shutters and trying to, keep bad stuff out or whatever. How do I become like the eye of the storm? So I'm a calm center to radiate out whatever I can do to add value or help or heal this situation. That spirit of always extending your energy in service of the world around us is very much the practice of Zen training as well as Aikido.
So I don't know, I think this is probably related to what you're discussing, but one of the things that you had mentioned before is that only when the 4 energy patterns come into healthy balance that you come into attunement with the way, and the way there really reminds me of the Tao, the
Right.
Tao being the way. And so it's to push, to hold, to roll with punches, and to let go. So is that related to like what we would describe as those 4 patterns, or is this a different concept?
No, the exact same concept, that each of those patterns does one of those 4 things you described. Push is the driver, to hold form is the organizer, to roll with the punches is the collaborator, and to just expand and let go is the gift of the visionary. So those same 4 patterns become ways that we can engage with the people and the environment around us. And they are very much aligned with Taoist principles as well. As I mentioned, these very much tuned into ancient wisdom traditions. But in Taoism, for example, they will talk about how they're much more tuned into how the individual interacts with our environment. So it's not so much just like what is your energy, but how your energy matches the situation you're in. And they'll talk about when you're in really turbulent times, you can really, there's certain kinds of energies that you can match it with. If you bring in a lot of driver energy, they wouldn't use the word driver, but they'd say becoming. You're going to create some new things by charging into it with that kind of driver intensity. In very turbulent times, you might also allow it and just kind of roll with the punches, which would be collaborator energy. If the times are more steady or stable, you can plant the seed and expect a harvest, then we can do the kind of organizer discipline things where we have a plan and then plan the work and work the plan. That works in steady times. Or sometimes in steady times, we can just be, it's kind of that visionary being, just hang out and just be calm. So depending on the conditions, we match it with these different energies. And that's what I mean by when we have access to all 4, then we have the flexibility to accord the way, bring out the energy that's appropriate for the situation.
So one of my favorite quotes from the Tao Te Ching is, the Tao that could be spoken is not the eternal Tao. And the way is like the bigger picture that all of these things fit into. Can you speak a little bit about the way and where that path is leading?
Well, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao is a beautiful way of saying words never capture it. Words can't capture it. If it were a formula, it would be dead. And what we're describing is so dynamic. There's a translation of the I Ching that I particularly like that talks about the way in terms of, they use the phrase waymaking, which is the process you go through right now in how you are making your way through this day, through this time, through the conversation we're having, so how we make our way. And it is in the moment attunement with what's available, and then it kicks off certain, I'll call them vibrations in us, and if we can conduct those clearly, out comes the gifts we have to offer. So it's a seamless interface between us and the moment, where the energy of the moment comes through us, we respond to it, just like clapping the hands and the sound brings forth. There's no hesitation with the sound. It's all that kind of naturalness. So what interrupts that naturalness is when we get stuck in our head. I was joking with some friends about a T-shirt I saw a while ago that said, "Give me a minute so I can overthink this." Isn't it great? But that, with human intelligence, we have such an ability to second guess ourselves and fill ourselves with doubt. Oh, and then get stuck in memories of this or fears of that, where we're up in our head and we're not in the present moment. And that's what we mean by getting stuck. When we say, Zen says, don't let your mind get stuck. There's a million ways our mind can get stuck. And part of the training is, how do you use your breath and your posture to free the mind so that you can operate as natural as a force of nature, right? So you're not always full of doubt and tension and trauma and difficulty. So it's another way of thinking about it is, how can we meet each moment with natural ease and expressing our gifts, or to heal what's broken without unnatural effort. So,
well, you talk about waymaking and bringing your gifts to bear. And, I see the emails that the Institute for Zen Leadership sends out, and they're very clear and concise, and they really speak to people's innate desire to make a positive difference in the world. So going back to my earlier question, I'm wondering, with all your leadership training and all the variety of courses that you're offering, what are people bringing to you as far as what they're looking for, and how are you fostering that?
Yeah. The question, especially post-COVID, is what is my life about now? I'm seeing that a lot. I've changed how I'm working. Maybe I've even changed where I'm working. We had so many people change jobs last year. Now maybe they're working from home half the time. There's good and there's bad in that. There's different, there can be isolation. What people are hungry for is, there's a reconnection with purpose. How do I make this time mean? How do I add what I'm about to this time? How do I make it mean what it can mean in the world, or find work that has meaning? I think that was one of the things, a lot, the force behind some of what was called the Great Resignation. So I'm seeing that a lot in the people who come to us. They're determined to live lives that matter, that make a difference, and to do the inner work that's needed for their outer work to come to full fruition. Because that's really what we're about, is how to work with this instrument that we are in a way where you can make your greatest difference. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people are hungering for that in their lives. I think when things get turned upside down, it becomes more important to us to figure out what matters. What do I want to pour this precious life energy into?
So as you've seen these younger generations come into their own and getting to the point where they're starting to be drawn toward this kind of work, what are some of the differences that you notice between the different generations that are currently active?
Well, I see the younger generation they're much more concerned about the climate crisis, that the planet they're inheriting from a generation that didn't seem or doesn't seem willing to get it reined in. We've got 8 more years, 7.5 more years before 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming is in our rear view mirror. We don't have much time. And meanwhile, we have a lot of other things grabbing our attention. Including, oh my goodness, look at the enormous human suffering we're seeing now out of Ukraine. So I see with the young people, they're saying, well, in the words of like a Greta Thunberg, wake up. What are you doing to us? And they're much more connected to how do we take care of this planet, and what can we do to turn around some of the extractive ways we've been using the planet in ways that will give us a long-term future for human life.
One of the things I want to get into too is how, with the world the way it is and everything, how can we resonate to get inspired instead of going down, some of the dark energy that's out there.
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in some of the darkness, especially if we get triggered by it. And we were talking about purpose and connection to purpose. And I think that's one of the ways forward in this. And Kathryn, I understand it's something you also teach, but a purpose aligns energy. It helps us craft our energy in a stream rather than just, a random direction. We start to be able to align toward a stream. It's also when we put our energy toward what we want to see in the world, it's more, we can start to manifest it. We start to naturally attune our own actions in ways that it seems like we're attracting it, but it's more like we're becoming the instrument that can manifest that vision. So that the part of the thing I remember, and I teach as well, is don't focus on what you don't want. Focus on what you do want. When it really comes to putting your energy out there, focus on what you want to bring about, on what the possibility you hold for this person or for this project. Focus on what you want to create, not on all the difficulty. And let the difficulty run through you. Perhaps you'll sense part of your purpose is there's some part of it you can heal. But there's no point, it serves nothing to dissipate ourselves on all that we cannot do anything about, that it's just going to play out as it will. There will be a lot of stuff that happens that we don't like. And if we exhaust ourselves in all of that, we don't serve anybody any good. But if we can let that run through and be tuned to where we can make our difference, we can do a lot of good.
Yeah, metaphysical rule number 1, focus on what you do want as opposed to what you don't want. It's simple, but we often don't do that.
No, we don't, because we get caught up in our fears, don't we? We get caught up in our head again, and we pull our attention off of what we're really trying to create.
Well, and also I find, these thoughts will be in my head, and all of a sudden I'll be like, well, are these mine, or did I pick up on these from somebody else? And I think for people who are empathic or sensitive and a little bit intuitive, we tend to be a sponge. And all of a sudden, if we don't wake up, we notice that our mind is filled with stuff that we don't want. And it's kind of been an unconscious thing to be this sponge. Do you have experience with that? And how do you kind of set some of those boundaries?
Well, yes, I have experience with that. And I don't know if I'm so good at setting the boundaries because, again, I let it run through. I mean, my sense is be the whole picture, and let it run through. Now, I'm not always good at clearing it. I have to be honest. Sometimes I watch, disturbing scenes out of Ukraine or whatever, and it just breaks my heart. So it's not like I'm so above this or it doesn't affect me. And yet, in a way, seeing that and recognizing that's part of our reality, I let it run through. Let it change me if it's going to change me. Let it bring up what it's going to bring up, and there may be some good that comes of it. I mean, because I mentioned earlier this deep practice of, I call it hara breathing, but being able to send breath down in the body. When I talk about letting it run through, I'm talking about physical work of just breathing something down rather than letting it rise up into your head where it causes anxiety. So how to just settle down with it and almost give it a channel right back into the earth where it can be composted, right? So I literally will direct energy down to just let things settle down when I start to get really disturbed by, the suffering of the world.
Well, Jenny, one of my Tai Chi buddies likes to say that, Jesus and the Buddha brought their teaching to the world at very difficult times in human history. And I think we can acknowledge that we're at a pretty difficult time in human history right now. And you're a Zen master. Zen is kind of a timeless tradition. And we talked earlier about what your students are coming to you for, what they're looking for in your workshops. But in terms of the zeitgeist and what the planet needs and what humanity needs, what do you think we need to bring forth? What do you think we need to cultivate?
we have to turn around our extractive models of how we live with one another and the earth. What I mean by extractive models is we use people, we use the earth, we use it up, and we aren't operating with a sense of fairness or reciprocity. And I've been recently, in work we're doing with how nature can inspire leadership, and how the permacultural type principles can inform leadership, which is work that I've been getting into this year. One of the things I've been so moved by is the depth of indigenous cultures around this question of how nature can inspire leadership, and also a sense of how ancient some of the wisdom traditions of indigenous cultures are. Ilarion McCurliffe, a wonderful indigenous elder of the Alouette from the Aleutian Islands and Nangan culture, speaks to a time of a culture that's 10,000 years old, 10,000 years old. And he speaks to a time of a better balance of what he calls masculine and feminine energy. And that a time would come, the elders had predicted in this 10,000-year-old culture, about 5,000 years ago, they predicted we would go through this long period where the masculine energy would just kind of run wild. We'd come through a time where it would be very were dominator models of leadership and dominator models of culture. If I had bigger weapons than you, I'd take what you had. That has been a history of humanity for thousands of years now. And we are all suffering from the fallout of that. We're also seeing that the way we've treated the planet is not sustainable. We've already wiped out, or we're in the process of wiping out, 1 million species on, so much of the life on which humans depend. And if we don't stop it, if we don't turn it around, we will wipe ourselves out. So this is a really interesting, dicey time that we all chose to live and lead in, all of us. And to turn around these models, to rethink how business works, how communities work, how politics work, how economic models work, that is all the work of our times. And it's not just in Zen leadership we see this. This is a growing trend in all kinds of areas. Nonprofits are funding new economic models. We're seeing much more investor activism in companies that are becoming not just greenwashing, but actually sincerely concerned about getting away from extractive models of using the earth up. This is a trend of our time. And you asked earlier about younger generations. This is the one they're going to insist upon, and that all of us at any generation can have some role to play in how we turn around this extractive model to something that better balances the masculine, the feminine, the energies, right? That we can think of them again as the 4 energies, to get to something that is sustainable, that is resilient, that is regenerative.
So is that what you mean when you talk about leading as the land?
Yeah, that's right. There was an article I was writing for Forbes recently about the difference between leading like a land grab, where I just take everything I can get, versus leading as the land. That in a Zen sense, as we resolve this false sense of separation, we are the whole picture. If you knew you were the whole picture, how would you be differently? How would you treat the people around you if you knew they were another part of you? How would you treat the land you walk on if you're walking on yourself?
Right. Well, Jenny, that's all the time we have for today. And I just want to thank you again for joining us today. And once again, you can go to zenleader.global or Phoebe, that's FEBI assessment.com for more about the Phoebe assessment and the training that we talked about earlier. This is Spirit's Journey on Truth Frequency Radio and Oneness Talk Radio. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll catch you next Saturday.
See you on the other side. Do you want to know the number one thing you can do to expedite your ascension process? According to the Channel of Bashar, it's drinking crystallized water. Where can you get crystallized water? Living Miracle LLC sells the Japanese-made medical-grade water machine that produces unlimited antioxidant-rich crystallized water. The fresh taste and health benefits of this water beats tap water every time. Since your body is up to 60% water, the quality of your drinking water has a huge impact on your health. You'll feel a noticeable difference in your mental clarity and physical energy level. And, as we all know, feeling better improves your emotional health too. This water system was developed by the Japanese after years of researching cultures that experience greater health and longevity. They discovered the secret was drinking water rich with molecular hydrogen, the most potent antioxidant for the body. This machine will last over 40 years and requires little maintenance, so it's a no-brainer. Get the edge on your life like professional athletes have been doing by drinking crystalline water. Call Nicholas at 913-359-8583 or email him at livingmiraclellc@gmail.com. That's livingmiraclellc@gmail.com.
Oneness Talk Radio. Hip, fresh, and fun. Discover your positivity portal 24/7 and experience unique talk radio from around the planet, perfectly mixed with music that enchants your soul. At a moment where everyone is being challenged to stay awake and release fear, OneNessTalkRadio.com is here to remind us all of our divine mastery. Imagine the activating power of intentional oneness and universal healing available at any time. With shows in multiple languages and formats, relax and explore. Our commitment to uplifting music from superstars and fresh talent, combined with your favorite shows, will inspire you to stay all day and soak in the gift of connection. Once you experience our signature oneness moment, in only 3 to 5 minutes, your heart will expand as miracles unfold. OneNessTalkRadio.com. One world, one voice. Expand your vision.